Breakfast with Bob.
Thank you, Poncho Man. My name is Bob Babbitt, and this is Breakfast with Bob. We're brought to you by PTO, the Professional Triathletes Organization, by Amp Human, by VeloFix, by Normatec, Form Goggles, UCAN, and our Challenged Athletes Foundation. Our next guest, the first wheelchair athlete to finish the Ironman Triathlon World Championship back in 1997, and now is walking again. I cannot believe it. Mr. John Mclean, how you doing, bud?
Hey, Bob.
Always a pleasure, my man. How you doing? How you hanging out through all the COVID craziness?
Yeah, it's crazy for the whole world, isn't it, to kind of stop and understand the new norm, to have an appreciation of what's right in front of us all the time. So it's challenging, but I kind of like the idea that the planet can breathe again. Not so many planes in the skies. The water quality is the best it's been. There's something in this. I hope we can take away some positives.
The thing I've been seeing is more and more families out for walks together, going for little bike rides together, people walking their dogs 7 times a day. I mean, it's like the pace of the world has sort of slowed down to a really nice crawl.
That's a great example. I think, when we look and go back in time, back in the day when the phone used to be connected to the wall, when you kind of pick it up and have a conversation. There's something in that whole piece. I mean, people's houses are generally a lot cleaner because they've got the time to do the chores that they wouldn't otherwise. And I guess the focus here is to kind of focus on what you can control, not what you can't, because there's a lot that we cannot. And making a moment to, get out, breathe, walk with a dog, walk with a family, walk with, I don't know, whoever you want to walk with, and really stop and smell the roses.
So speaking of smelling the roses, you're a guy who's a rugby player, or Aussie football, and back in 1988, you're training for a triathlon, and you're on your bike and get hit by a truck, paralyzed from the waist down. At that point, did you know anybody in a wheelchair? Did you have a sense of what your new life was going to be?
No, not at all. It was kind of my topic is change, and there's a really good example of change, right? Because one minute, I'm running around playing professional football, rugby league here in this country.
Yeah.
And life's kind of pretty good because that was my dream as a little boy to aspire to do that. So, you're kind of 22, you think about what you were doing when you were 22. I'm going to say life was pretty good, right? You're independent, you moved away from mum and dad, you've got your car, maybe you got a girlfriend, maybe life's kind of awesome. And then it's not. So you wake up after getting hit by this truck, coming out of the coma, and the world that you knew it is no longer, and the pain that you're experiencing is difficult to articulate. And therefore, how do you make sense of this new norm? So to your point, no, I did not know anyone who was in a wheelchair. I remember playing football, and that's ironic. You made me kind of think back, Bob. I remember a girl coming up to me when I was playing football, and asking me for a dance. And, a male back when I was playing, which is a long time ago, I was like, yeah, of course. If you ask me for a dance, I'll have a dance with you. This girl was in a wheelchair, and that's kind of something that I did because I thought that was the right thing to do. And isn't it ironic that, I ended up in a wheelchair?
You've got the social group of all the guys you play rugby with. And usually when this type of stuff happens, those guys are around for a couple weeks, right? Or maybe a month. And then all of a sudden gets really quiet. All of a sudden there's not a lot of people visiting, and you have to face the reality that this is my new normal, and how do I get through it? Being an athlete, how much did that help you figure out what you're going to do next?
So it's tough, and it's tough for anyone who's gone through that experience. And it's about your conversations with yourself. Right. So think about, I'm kind of big on the neural stuff. So think about, what is Bob saying to Bob if that happened to Bob? What does that look like in his world? Or more specifically, what did that look like in mine? All I wanted to do was to get back to where I was, because I was very happy in that space. And therefore, you realize over time you cannot go back to that. And that's a difficult pill to swallow. A couple of things that were interesting for me is that the other guy in intensive care had broken his neck, so he couldn't move at all. And therefore, that's that reference point to say, I'm really lucky. I'm lucky I'm alive. I'm lucky I don't have brain damage. I'm lucky I still have use of my upper body. So you kind of put things into perspective pretty quickly, and then you kind of start to work out what is it going to look like. And for me, initially, I just wanted to get out of that hospital to smell fresh air and look at the blue sky and look at the green grass. And I know that sounds trivial, but once it's taken away from you, you really, and maybe again with COVID, what's happening at the moment, it really makes you stop. So when I finally had that opportunity to get out of the hospital 4 months later, then you start to reframe, and what can I do? I wanted to be a fireman as a career, and no longer the case. So you start to work out what your next steps are going to be, or your next wheel is going to be, and make sense of the new norm.
When the injury happened. But when did you start thinking, well, wait a second, I can do triathlon in a wheelchair? Because at that point, there was road racing in a wheelchair, but there really wasn't very many people in wheelchairs trying to do a triathlon.
Yeah, well, in this country, that's absolutely the case. When I look back, and it's always important to reference the people that are important to you. So outside of family, my best buddy came to visit me in hospital once a week for 4 months, and that's
Wow.
a really good point.
That's when you know who your friends are. Yeah,
exactly. And I get it, right? Life goes on, and you move forward, and you and I know many examples of people who have tried to give back, and but it's up to that individual to move forward. So my kind of buddy John Young got me, I got him, and therefore, he said he was in hospital a lot when he was a kid, and therefore he was compelled to make sure that he gave back to me. So isn't that interesting around? And I was very grateful for all those times. So moving forward to triathlon. In 1993, a hand cycle here in Australia was imported from America. It was called a Freedom Rider, and it joined by a cotter pin. Remember those cotter pins, or the quick release to lock it in place? So there's a front and there's a rear, and you kind of bring it together. It was made of steel. But when I first got on that thing, because a buddy had gotten one and I just wanted to trial it, I was kind of hooked, right? So I said the missing point for me to go back to do the triathlon was a bike, because I could swim and I could push my wheelchair, and so that then opened up the door to wanting to go back and try the Nepean Triathlon. So I went back with Jono, because he got me in and out of the water, and it was quite a steep boat ramp to exit the water to go up to the transition area.
Yeah.
So in 1994, I crossed the line again, and that was quite cathartic, Bob, because that was my mountain to climb at the time, because I was training for that triathlon, as you know. And the dream started to evolve. I then watched Wide World of Sports here in Australia, and they showcased the 1994 Ironman in Maclean. So that did two things for me. One, I identified a mentor in Greg Welch, who won the race, and I also identified a chap by the name of, as you know, John Franks, who opened up the door. So here's me kind of watching in my lounge room in Australia going, hey, go Aussie Greg Welch, and also go wheelchair guy, because I can kind of relate in a small way. I certainly hadn't done what he was doing. When he missed the bike cutoff, Bob, that lit my mindset really kind of went, maybe I could be the first, right? So that opportunity to look forward to something, and that opened up the door to me to race against John Franks in Panama City, 1995.
Raced against John. Did you talk to him about the Kona experience?
I did, and as you can imagine, my strategy at that stage was to be very humble, to be honoured to have the opportunity to meet with him. He was very keen to know what my swim time was, my bike was, and you remembering my bike cost 3,500 Australian dollars. I understand that his bike cost kind of $45,000. So I knew I didn't have the technology that he had, and I said to him that it's just an honour for me to be here and to meet with you, and hopefully I can kind of help push you along the way. That was kind of my view. In terms of the actual race, the half Ironman in Panama City, my swim was kind of a strength, because I could swim freestyle where John Franks would do backstroke. Right. So I ran myself out on the course in front, because the PC athletes back then started before the pros. So there was a small period of time, Bob.
You're leading the race.
Yeah, so it was kind of cool, right? There's the police escort. There's the guy, driving the car all the time.
The lead vehicle. Yeah.
Like, hey, check me out. And then this guy, Alex, someone from Russia, just kind of. Well,
Alex Rukasoyev, yes.
So it was kind of just that moment in time to go. But there was a beautiful vibe for me to be back in the game. And I think the reason I mentioned that, having this accident and, spending all the time in the chair and having this new language that people would use, which I didn't like at all. To be called disabled,
right?
To be called handicapped, to diss someone is not to encourage. It's the complete opposite. So remembering, this is an important point, because there are two different types of athletes. One, an athlete that was born with a challenge, and therefore they know no different. And the other side of that, someone like myself, someone like David Bailey, someone like Carlos Molina. I mean, there are Mark Harriman. There are many examples. Lauren Parker. There are many people that have had a life before an accident and then a new life, if you could kind of use that term. So here was I really struggling with this language, and I thought, my friends still come and visit me in hospital, and they still see me as John, not John disabled, John. Getting back to Panama City, now I'm back to being John, and I'm back into the game of life, and I'm loving the new challenge of taking on the sport of triathlon and what that could look like. So I knew the reason for me to go to Panama City to race against John Franks was that I wanted to get to Kona to have the same experience, and I wanted to be the first in the world to make all the cut-offs. So that's how the dream started for me, and I was fortunate enough to win the category in '95 in Panama City, to line up in Kona '95 to take on that course.
And then you get there in '95, miss the bike cutoff time, come back in '96 and miss the bike cutoff time. But I think Sharon Ackles, the race director, said, why don't you go off and do the marathon? Because at that point, they still wanted to see if someone could finish the race. People didn't quite understand that wheelchairs would probably go faster in the marathon. Racing chairs probably go faster. So you finish, you do the marathon, come across the finish line, and they put a medal around your neck. And what'd your brother say to that?
Yeah, let me take you back a step, because I've been researching this next. People are asking the question a lot. How do you do all the stuff you've done? So I thought, why don't I put it in a book and kind of share that? And as part of that research, I have to thank John Franks, because John Franks was asked to go on in '94, and he chose not to. That was his choice, and therefore that created that opportunity for me. So in '95, I missed the bike cutoff by 40 minutes, and David Yates, you would know that name, he said, you are officially disqualified, but we would ask for you to go on to see whether the course can be completed by a wheelchair athlete. So let's call that '95 in 14 hours and 51 minutes. So
you did do it in '95.
Sorry, Bob?
You were able to do the marathon in '95.
Correct. So I finished in 14 hours, 51, whatever that was. So I go back the next year, re-qualify in a place called Santa Rosa. That was the qualifying race. And I line up in Kona '96. So now I've got a loader bike. This one's made of aluminium opposed to steel. I'm looking at my watch, and I'm like, I got this. About 10K to go. What's that, about 6 miles to go. I got a flat, and I missed the bike cut off by 15 minutes over that, which is hard. It's heartbreaking. So that particular year, Sharon Ackles was there, and she said, you've missed the cutoff officially, but again, we would ask you to go on. So I finished in 14:39, and they gave me a finisher's medal, and I was kind of wrapped. And my brother said, you got to give it back. So the next day I met with Sharon and said, there's been a mistake. I have to give this back to you. And that was special as well, because she was crying, and I was kind of crying because that medal meant so much to me.
Yeah.
And then if anyone deserves it, it's you. So that opened up the door in '97, and I'm very grateful for Ironman for doing this. There was now an official category for wheelchair athletes.
Yep.
So that was that was a wonderful opportunity. And clearly the other two guys wanted to be the first. But I was honoured to cross the line in 12 hours 21 to be the first wheelchair athlete to complete the course in the cut-off times.
And talk a little bit about, I mean, you're talking about taking 2 hours off of what you did the year before. Was that all in a hand cycle? Was it because of lighter hand cycle, more training? What was the difference?
I think a combination of a couple of things. One, that I moved to live in St. Petersburg in Florida. Met a beautiful family that kind of adopted me for 4 months. And that got me close to Chris Peterson. And Chris Peterson was a guy
from Top End. Yeah.
I could kind of get access to him and talk about the technologies on the hand bike, kind of bringing it back a little bit instead of being kind of completely upright, coming back a little bit just to try and be a bit more aerodynamic. Clearly, they've come a long way since
oh my
then.
God, yeah.
There was myself and another wheelchair athlete, were kind of training in around the same time. And that kind of really pushed that. So, and because I'd moved there, I'm now training full time. So that certainly made a big difference because I wasn't, working back here. And, we really kind of pushed that envelope. So I think a combination of adopting a more professional attitude, putting myself in the right environment in terms of the temperature, working with other athletes, I think that was the difference in terms of cutting off that time.
I see a lot is athletes go out and they do well in something and then they want to get better. And that you had done 3 years in a row, missed the bike cutoff time 2 times, and then made all the cutoff times. You're the type of guy that once you've achieved something, you want to move on to the next goal. So then it became swimming the English Channel. And talk a little bit about that, sort of your attitude of, okay, I finished the Ironman, what's next? English Channel. That's a hell of a challenge. If you talk about the Ironman, that's one thing, but you're talking about swimming the English Channel as a paralyzed guy. Talking about how tough that was, and you just put in a training for it.
Yeah. So again, I always think it's important to go back to come forward. So what is your starting point and kind of where are you and where do you want to get to? So, okay, the starting point as a little boy, I dreamed about being an athlete. So fast forward time, I'm a professional rugby player, so that's great. Then I had the accident and now I'm actually becoming a professional athlete in a different way. I did not presume and nor would anyone kind of see their life changing in that direction. So now here I am, I'm sponsored by Nike, I'm sponsored by Gatorade, I'm sponsored by Qantas, here I am as and I know how hard it was to get that finishers medal. I mean, it took 3 years and got it. Ironman is just one beast of a race to compete against athletes and yourself. So once that had been crossed, the next challenge was a buddy had swum the channel and he said, "Mate, if I can do it, so can you." So that opened up that dialogue, and I put on 20 kilos, 44 pounds. I was 78 kilos, went to 98. The water temperature got down to 9 degrees in training. You might be able to make that translation.
Cold. Yeah. Shrinkage. Yeah, it's bad.
I love it. Yeah. So the challenge for me there, Bob, was not only to be the first wheelchair athlete to swim the English Channel. It was to be the first athlete that had done both Hawaii and the English Channel. So there was an added bonus for me. And my driver was always to inspire kids in wheelchairs. And I set that as a goal whilst I was in the hospital bed, lying there for 4 months, wanting to do something with my life and to inspire kids. So that was the reason or the why between wanting to continue to chase dreams. So on my second attempt, I got across the English Channel in 12 hours and 55 minutes. And it was wonderful to have that experience. So, Gatorade filmed the documentary, David Knight, my dear friend. And that documentary is now available for any little kids around the world that wants to have a look at it. I'm happy to flick that to you to share with the team. Let me send that one. It was an equal, to answer your question. It was on an equal parallel to the Ironman, but the complete opposite. So Hawaii, you got to be strong, you got to be hard.
Lean. You got to be skinny.
Exactly, and the heat, the wind, the hills, all that. So the opposite of that is the English Channel, which is freezing cold. You need to be fat or a fair amount of subcutaneous body fat on you to not go hypothermic in the cold conditions. So I was so happy to tick off that box of swimming the channel, and then it was the next challenge. So like, what's next, right? So it's almost like the next step in Ironman for most athletes towards the back end. It's just keep on putting those feet in front of each other, and that'll eventually get you to the finish line. So I was looking forward to the next challenge.
The next challenge, Olympics, Paralympics 2000.
Yeah, so I mean, here's a great opportunity. Imagine, because I was trying to test myself, right, which we all do. Some of us, test ourselves more than others, but I think when you look at the Olympic Games, home Olympic Games, I found the sport of wheelchair racing, and for me doing Ironman, it was always about surviving the bike and getting into the racing wheelchair to cross the finish line. I wasn't a wheelchair racer. I was just trying to make a cut-off time. And then to kind of focus on the games in Sydney, where I qualified for quite a few events in the Paralympics. So, and also to qualify at the Olympic Games as a demonstration event. It was really special to be part of both games.
So cool. And then in 2008, you get a silver in rowing in the Paralympics.
Have you heard of the sport of rowing? Are you interested? No. It's been included in the Beijing program. Yes. So it's kind of, And then, yeah, no, I didn't win. I didn't win, or we didn't win. I didn't win in Sydney in terms of a medal. So therefore, I really wanted to focus in on the medal because we were good enough to get a medal in Beijing, and we did. So it was really special to be a part of the games in Beijing.
So there was a point where you come to Noosa. You're having some shoulder issues, and Pete Jacobs is from Noosa and had been working with Dr. Ken Ware and his tremor therapy. And you went to see him primarily, wasn't it to work on your shoulder because you have some shoulder issues?
Absolutely. My intent, I'm now heading to Rio. That's where I wanted to go. I wanted to win a medal. We got a silver medal in rowing. Got beat by less than a second. So I was like, okay, I want to get my gold medal. And that's why
kayaking? Was that going to be kayaking?
Yeah, so paddling was introduced for the Paralympics. And I was like, okay, this is where I'm going next. Kind of that's what I do, right? I have set myself a challenge, work towards it, and build a team and have a crack. So Ken Ware said to me, so what do you want? And it was beautiful. It was just a beautifully timed question at exactly the right time, because it made me think, what do I really want? And the answer to that was not a gold medal. The answer to that was to walk on the beach with my wife. What would that be like? And then he said, okay, let's explore that. So sometimes we get confused with a lot of noise. And I'm going to say that's for a lot of us pre-COVID-19. And now there's an opportunity to breathe and to be still. And that was not dissimilar to meeting with Ken Ware. So going through that therapy, it really unlocked a lot of stuff that I had been having conversations with myself. The language that I would use is, hi, my name is John Mclean. I am a wheelchair athlete. And then he said, stop saying that. So it made me realize that maybe there could be more. And I had the potential. I was just unaware for all those years. And I did take those first. So I'm an incomplete T12 paraplegic. I still have the paralysis, right side. But I had the potential to do that. But Ken Ware really unlocked that potential in me to have that moment in time to walk with my wife, to pick up my son from preschool, and then to start to dream again. So I'm very grateful for that time with Ken.
And you were paralyzed in '88, training for the Nepean Triathlon. And then you go back to do this triathlon after you're walking again, and you swim, ride a bike, and walk with poles. But you do that triathlon, the one you were training for when you were first paralyzed. I mean, I don't know how you can do anything more full circle than that.
Yeah, I mean, you're exactly right. And again, to step back, right? So I'm spending this time with Ken. I get on a conventional bike again. We get some engineers to adjust the pedals with the foot straps at a different angle to get a rotation. And then I started to dream again. It's like, okay, I can swim. I can ride a bike. There's a lot of things that were not working, still not working, but I was able to ride a bike. And therefore, this piece around how do you then cover 10 kilometers, 6 miles? What would that look like? So then, I got access to some carbon fiber leg brace technology from a gentleman here in Melbourne, Neuromuscular Orthotics. Darren Pierre is his name. And, I put these leg braces on, and then walking poles for added stability. And I just took one step at a time. And when I realized that if I keep on going forward, and it was wonderful to have Dave Orlowski to come out to support that, one of the original in 78 in Kona. Yeah. So he was there, and some Olympic athletes were here, and, Crow was there. Crowy won, Hawaii 3 times. So I had all these, superstars coming along, and my family and my friends to support the 6-mile walk, 10-kilometer walk, and it took 3.5 hours, but every step got me closer to that finish line. And I'm so grateful for all these people coming together to encourage me to get to that line. And the dream came true. I crossed the line 26 years later, holding hands with my wife and my son.
So knowing you, there's always another goal. There's always something else on the horizon. What's next for John Mclean?
So since then, I've had my right knee operated on. So back in the day, I ripped off anterior and posterior, front and rear ligaments, which attached to the knee. And it wasn't a consideration for all those years, but now that I'm trying to improve my walking, it's just a question: is it possible? Well, I don't know, but what do you need to do? Well, number one is meet with the surgeon, who was not initially interested in operating because of the history, bone density, etc. And David Parker was kind enough to perform the operation. We are now 6 months post that. I've now got some technology out of Germany. A company called Autobot. So they have it's called a C brace. So just quite some time ago, we recast my leg to put a new leg brace. So laterally on that carbon fiber leg brace will be called a C brace. So it's a knee brace technology. We've got an ankle brace to the ankle joint. I'm getting measured up on my initial fitting on the 4th of May. So I'm exploring, Bob, whether it's possible for me to take some steps using technology and innovation as well as a mindset. So if it is possible, which I hope it to be, and therefore it will be possible for others, as you know, we opened up the door all those years ago to Kona, and maybe I played a little part in that, but I'm now excited about what that could then look like. If it is possible to improve my gait cycle, then maybe I could do more.
So the fact that you've done the Ironman in a wheelchair, and to do it as an able-bodied guy might be something that attracts you, I'm guessing.
Absolutely. So, take a step back again. Apologies for referencing timing, because for me it's a really good point. That Dad had said to me before my accident, "Son, how far can you go?" And that was just a beautiful question at the right time. So, and that then became obviously the name of the book, because that just made sense. And there's a movie coming from that, which, who would have thought? And now it's, the little boy in me continues to dream. So if I can be more efficient in terms of that cycle, maybe it's I could do more. And I saw Ironman 96 last night. I watched it, and I noticed that one of the competitors right at the end completed the course. She had a knee brace on, and she used Canadian crutches to support her in the marathon. So, maybe that creates a little idea in my mind that if I can become strong enough with my leg strength, now that my knee is reattached, maybe to do a half Ironman, if that's possible, to make the cutoff on the bike, and to use this new leg brace and to use crutches. Clearly, that's been done before, so it can be done again. That maybe there's more for me to do. The huge driver for me is always raising money for kids in wheelchairs in this country of Australia. So that's a natural progression. If I can, I will. I continue to dream. So if I can, we'll need to see what this looks like, but I'm excited about taking my next steps.
When you look back at everything you've done, what do you look at as your greatest moment? Your greatest moment as an athlete?
I think that there's 2 parts. One, Kona, absolutely 1995. Why? Because my best friend who came to visit me in hospital once a week for 4 months was the guy that was there to get me in the water, was the guy that inspired me to keep on going when I was done. Um, you might recall the last hill on the bike section when I missed it by 40 minutes. He said, it's my son's birthday today. I'm not with him, I'm with you. And that inspired me to keep on going. And in the marathon, when I was completely dusted, nothing left. He said, the pain won't last forever, but the memories will, which gives me goosebumps again, but it refueled my tank. It changed my framework, and therefore I continue to go on because he was the one that was there for me in hospital. So he was the one to give me a slap on the back at the finish line. That meant more to me than getting my finisher's medal in '97. So as an athlete, we did that as a collective team, and I think any athlete on the planet can always reference the team that supported to get them to that moment. So as an athlete, that's that. As a father, as a husband, to cross the finish line 26 years later, with that picture, that was a critical moment because no one would ever have thought the guy in the wheelchair after 26 years would get out of the wheelchair, let alone think about taking steps, let alone do a triathlon. So that was Ironman 95 and Maclean 2014.
Love it. John, always love chatting with you. Now, when's the movie coming out?
That's unfolding. So the script's written, the producer's on board. He's now getting that to directors. So as soon as that's ready to unfold, Bob, I'd love to be able to share that with you. I don't have the date yet. They're working through the process. But it's an exciting piece to share that, dreams do come true if you chase them.
Absolutely. And this is actually, when the world gets back to normal, it's a good time to launch independent films. It works really well because you can, rent out theaters. We started our film, We Are Triathletes, in 300 some theaters around the US all on the same night. So it's totally doable to do something great with your film. It's sort of like when you came here with the book. We did a fun book tour, Boston Marathon, and here in San Diego with Tri Club, and we'll do that again with the movie.
Yeah, I mean, just referencing CAF for a bit, that, I was a CAF-sponsored athlete. I'm very grateful for you and all the rest of the guys for the support that you've given me, and obviously to so many around the world. So, the journey continues to unfold. I think just looking at the movie, it's a piece around uplifting, and, I think all of us need to be uplifted from watching, Mark and Dave and Paula and, all those beautiful stories about Ironman, but also the ones towards the back end that, they crossed that line as well. They chased their dreams. I think the world needs more uplifting stories to talk about the human spirit and, connecting into the things that truly matter. So, I'm very grateful for all the support, Bob, you're giving me and CAF athletes. And, it's a way to give back and, excited about next steps.
Love it. Again, the book has done really well, correct? How far can you go on my 25-year quest to walk again? If I didn't know you when I first watched the video of you from Ken Ware, of a guy sitting at a weight bench and all of a sudden standing up and walking, I would have been like, this is so hokey. I cannot believe this. But I knew you, and I knew it was real, and it was still unbelievable. When you took that first step, what was your heart rate? You must have been like 220 beats going, what the heck's going on?
Well, it's interesting with Ken, and I'll send you both those links to share again to your audience if that's of interest. But it really paints the picture, because Ken's all about, and I love it, just be in the moment. So his language is calm. So your heart rate is not expected to go through the roof like, the night before.
First step in 25 years.
Yeah, no, exactly. So let's just be in the moment, and therefore try to take the step, believe, have the courage to take the first step. And therefore, I wasn't thinking or feeling. I was just so in the moment about, okay, let me try. Because my conversations were, as I said before, I'm John Mclean, wheelchair athlete. I would not engage in anything more than that, because that was my bubble that I moved in and around. And therefore, to take that first step, I had to be in the moment. And then that step led to the next step, and you know what's happened since then.
I love it. John, thanks so much for taking so much time. I'm glad you guys are safe and sound there in Australia. And hopefully we'll be able to end this social distancing and spend some time together soon.
crazy time, Bob. Thanks again for your support. I do look forward to giving a catch-up cuddle, we call that, and reconnecting with the world.
Love it. John Mclean has been our guest. Again, we're brought to you by the PTO, the Pro Triathletes Organization, by Amp Human, by VeloFix, Normatec, Form Goggles, You Can, and of course, our Challenged Athletes Foundation. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Catch you next time.